Welcome to the RotoQL Edge, the video interview series where DFS players can learn from the pros. I'm your host, Mike Sheikman, and with me, I have the self-proclaimed best beard in show for 10 years running. No, but in all seriousness, he's one of the most well-known personalities in the industry. We're happy to have him on. CrazyGabey, how's it going?
Not bad, buddy. How are you doing? And also, you said there's going to be a pro here. I'm looking at the Skype chat. I see myself. I see you. I don't see any third party. So you're probably going to have to retract that statement, just FYI.
Oh, what are we going to do here? All right, I think we're going to have to find a new guest.
It's over. Cut it. Cut the mics.
Well, it's great to have you on. We're taping this on January 12th, a Tuesday. And currently, got a lot going on surrounding you. What has it been like just being in a social media firestorm, would you say?
Well, as many astute social media users have pointed out, I did this all for attention. And so the amount of attention I've received has been phenomenal. It couldn't have been better. For an attention whore, this is definitely the optimal outcome. I'm very pleased by it all. It's been great.
Well, I'm happy that you're getting exactly what you want there. We're going to have tons of people who are going to be coming on here and just, not knowing much about you, kind of checking out RotoQL. And so why don't you tell a little bit about yourself and how you got your start in DFS?
Yeah, so I found out about FanDuel way back in the day. I think it was less than a year after they started. A buddy of mine was telling me all about how you could log on and you could actually play Jared Bayless back when he was with the Raptors and he was playing like 40-plus minutes at point guard. And you could play him every night for a cheap cost, and you could just beat everybody because that cheap-costed guy would let you load up on all the other studs. And we, of course, had played season-long fantasy basketball leagues together for a long time. I thought the idea was cool. I logged in. I played a little bit. I've been hooked ever since. And right around the time that I started playing daily fantasy, I actually got an offer to write some FanDuel fantasy football picks for a site called Razzball.com. That sort of parlayed into writing at thefakebasketball.com. Where I looked at my wife one day and said, hey, honey, you know what this industry needs? They need a live show of some sort that goes up all the way almost until lineup slot because people have so many questions on Twitter with all the late-breaking news for NBA. So I started the first ever live daily fantasy show, put it in my article, actually embedded it at thefakebasketball.com. That led to a site called Daily Fantasy Radio, which had a 90-minute daily fantasy show every single day. And then after that, that led to Roto Grinders, where I was up until the end of November of 2015. And now I'm just kind of hanging out, waiting to see what happens next.
Awesome. Yeah, really great stuff, up to this point. And what would you say? First off, Jared Bayless, that's some really good publicity for him. Hopefully.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the most any show has talked about him for quite some time. So,
still a fan of what he can do off the bench, but I think we're a select few. Cool. In terms of being a DFS player, I know you said you weren't a professional, but you have seen some success. What are things that you can tell sort of players starting out? Stuff that they should know about.
Well, I'm always a little torn when I get a question like this because on one hand, you really want to tell people things like game selection and bankroll management and sort of the stalwarts that everybody talks about. And while those things are important, I think it's also a good idea to realize that a lot of people who come into this industry, for instance, if they stumble across your site out of the blue, they may never go to another site for strategy again. They might not even come back to your site again, and they may not be that interested in all of the technical terms of the industry. And I think that's where things might get lost in the shuffle a little bit sometimes. So I think what's important is just to remind people to never play above your means because you'll tend to make irrational decisions like trying to make the money back the next day or not playing hunches, which a lot of times, I know hunches are anecdotal, but hunches a lot of times can be unconscious recall in our brains. All the information we have that we can't, cognitively recall. Well, maybe we have an idea we really like a player, but we can't remember why, and you'll tend to stray away from those and kind of only go with the safe picks when you have too much money on the line. So the best advice I would give to people is just play what's within your means and have fun, and whatever money you might lose by not winning, just be willing to write that off as the cost of entertainment. That's probably the biggest thing I would tell people, and I think that's the biggest barrier to the new casual player when they first sign on to a daily fantasy site.
Gotcha. And when you got started, or I mean, even when you're talking to people who are thinking about ramping up and their bankroll, things like that, are you recommending sort of a daily grind and really just kind of immersing yourself into everything?
I think a daily grind is very important if that's what your explicit purpose for playing daily fantasy sports is.
Mm-hmm.
But again, trying to take the anti-approach of what a lot of folks who will be on these shows for you do. I just kind of want to think of the casual new player in mind, and I think a lot of times that can weigh on people. That can really be burdensome and tiring. And so, the grind is great, but also pace yourself. Not everybody needs to try to play 7 days a week. And, you should definitely set goals for yourself. That's a great thing because without goals, there's really no direction you can go. And you always want to be going up, of course, when you're playing any game like this. But I do think that pacing yourself is a good idea, too. So the grind is important if that's what your goal is. But if you're a casual player, don't feel like you have to keep up with the rat race of everybody else. You can grind it out nice and slow, take a couple days off a week, and it's everybody going at their own pace. There is no pace that everybody has to follow.
Absolutely, yeah. Setting expectations is key. So, I mean, you've talked to a lot of the industry stalwarts and, a lot of players that have been very successful. I mean, what are, some lessons that, you've learned in talking to guys that have done really well in DFS?
Oh, geez, there's a couple of people that I have to give shout-outs to
please.
for sure. The first one is DraftCheat, former colleague of mine at RotoGrinders, and in my opinion, pound for pound, and it almost pains me to say this because I know it's going to get back to him that I said it on air, but pound for pound, in my opinion, the best daily fantasy player in the world. I don't know if world, America, or whatever you say, but the stuff that I've talked with him about and the level that I believe he always is operating on, no matter what the slate is. It could be soccer on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. It can be the late NBA slate starting at 10 o'clock at night. The guy is just always on point. And, kind of getting to know him a little bit over the past year, you learn that it really has to do with how much work he puts in. It's not like he's, Rain Man and he just all of a sudden hears something and retains it forever. Sometimes this guy's waking up at 6 a.m. to start researching if there's a big day in NBA that he knows he's going to want to go really deep on in terms of entering all out lineups for tournaments. So DraftCheat would probably be the guy that I would have to give a shout-out to and say that I just learned a lot about the process and how you prepare yourself for success by talking with him. And then just so many of my former colleagues at RotoGrinders, picking up little things here and there along the way. Dave Potts goes by Cheese is Good, playing on all the different sites. He's two-time $1 million winner, I believe. And his articles, always a little off the beaten path, but just amazing concepts to sort of take in and digest and apply over the course of the years. So going to check out his archives on his articles at rotogrinders.com would be great. And just too many more to name. So I just want to give a shout out to all my colleagues at RotoGrinders. I've grown so much over the past couple of years just from learning from them.
Great. Well, I mean, this is a RotoQL podcast, so shouting out the draft sheet as best player in the world. A little contentious now.
Listen, I understand. So, Max, you get your doing proper, buddy. You are certainly one of the guys that are up there. So, absolutely.
Fair enough. And I guess, just while we're at it, I got to ask, we talked about the origins of you, rising the DFS industry as a personality, but what about the beard itself? What is the story behind the beard? Let's set it straight.
Yeah, well, the beard actually came about, first of all, because I'd always wanted one since I was younger. And I always told myself as soon as because the biggest thing is the connectors. It's like right in here where the goatee kind of connects to the rest of your face. And there's always a couple of patches on people when they're in their early 20s. I told myself as soon as those issues were resolved, I was going all in on the beard. But then also, you just hate shaving. It's you actually have to do something to not have a beard. You have to do nothing to have a beard. So having a beard is actually much easier than not having a beard. And my best advice to everyone would be find a length that works for you. I take actually about 6 inches or so off once a year. It starts to get a little too scraggly, the loose ends. So right about here where it's at now, perfect for me. Find your beard length and stick with it.
It's phenomenal. I think I found my beard length, and it's 1 centimeter. So
no, you can get it longer than that, man. Come on now. You're not even trying if that's all you're doing.
All right. Well, I'll take off like maybe a 6-month sabbatical or something. Cool. So you can follow him at CrazyGabey or CrazyGabey, on Twitter.
It's both, either or. People can say whatever. So
it's either or. CrazyGabey on Twitter. And also, you can find out more about RotoQL at RotoQL app. So, I guess speaking of RotoQL, you've gotten to check out the tool a little bit. What are your early thoughts so far?
Yeah, and I think this would be a good opportunity also to kind of address the elephant in the room.
Oh, yes, let's do it, sure.
Yeah.
I
obviously had a piece come out from the New York Times, which I think a lot of people could view as very negative for a business such as yours. And I can definitely see why they would believe it to be that way. I just want to kind of clear the air on one specific aspect of it and say that my quotes are my quotes, and I'm also not an editor for the New York Times. And while I stand behind what Jay, the author, wrote, I also do have my own thoughts about certain things, and frankly, in the New York Times article that's going to be read by millions of uneducated, daily fantasy outside casual observers, you can't go too deep into certain issues. So for multi-entry specifically, which is what the RotoQL app deals with, let me say first of all that I don't think multi-entry needs to go away completely, nor do I think it is the root or the cause of all evil. In fact, I still play a lot myself, and when I do, I mainly play tournaments and play multi-entry. The RotoQL app led me to a huge finish on Christmas Day, actually, the first day that I tried it. And I ended up taking first through seventh place in a $5 tournament, just south of $9,000 for the day, which was great because I made back all the Christmas presents that I'd spent on people. Plus, I was actually able to pay for my wife's hotel room and her travel to go visit with her family. She goes usually for the week after Christmas to visit her family in Pennsylvania. So it's been great. And there are definitely changes in this industry that need to be made, but I do think there's always going to be a place for people who want to play multi-entry. I don't want it to go away, and I think the RotoQL app, if I had to recommend any tool in this industry, it would be this one. It's so comprehensive, and just the amount of things that you can customize specifically to how you view players on each individual slate, I've frankly never seen anything like it. And again, I worked at RotoGrinders. They have some great stuff, but this app takes the cake as far as if I had to give somebody a one-stop shop for a tool that can really help them take their game to the next level.
Right. Well, we appreciate your thoughts on it, and I mean, third-party tools and services. We're just starting to get the ground running here. And hopefully with education and things like that, it's a step in the right direction. There's certainly a lot of work to be done. You raised a lot of issues that I think that need to be brought to the forefront personally, but. Obviously, when you're dealing with people where the jobs and money is at stake, there's always going to be contentiousness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably the biggest thing. I forget who was was it Upton Sinclair that wrote, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on it." And I don't mean that in any condescending or arrogant fashion. I just mean it to say that. I believe the answer to a lot of the problems of this industry is going to have to come from not even necessarily people on the outside, but I don't know that it's going to come from those who are most heavily invested in the industry, not because I don't think they care, but because I do feel that there is a vested interest in the status quo at least remaining somewhat the same as it is now, and I don't think that's a recipe for real change in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you talked about your concern with multi-entry. What are sort of things that are on your radar that you think could be really helpful in developing the industry further and helping those average Joes raise their game a little bit in DFS?
Yeah, I was very pleased that we finally got the definitive answer, even though it was pulling tooth and nails and took forever, to the scripting issue. More specifically, what is allowed and what is not allowed, and is it even detectable? Because we have the quote finally on record from Justine at FanDuel that there is no way for FanDuel to even detect them. I would assume that DraftKings, although I don't want to say it as a fact because I don't know, they didn't give a comment, I would assume that they can't be detected by either site or any site that's out there. And so I think that alone, being fact, and it's been kind of crazy to me that hasn't been one of the main issues talked about on social media and in various forums about this piece, that alone I think means that we have to at least begin to take measures that curb any potentially nefarious behavior using automated processes, whether it's scripting, scrapers. I don't know all the technical terms. I'm not a software engineer. You guys have some phenomenally smart people working at your site. But I do think that just the fact that it's now on the record, we cannot even detect these things, let alone moderate them and actually kind of curb their use for less than ethical purposes, means that we have to take drastic and very firm steps to making sure that whatever could be exploited by these things is minimized as much as possible.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to be discussed here, and And I really think that education is going to be a big part too. And how much do the operators really fall in their roles and responsibilities here, or are there other third parties and things like that need to come about and kind of foster this change? There's a lot of ways that this can go, and it really makes it exciting for the industry. I think there's a lot of positive things that can come out of this. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. If I could interject there,
yeah, sure, absolutely.
A lot of people see, DFS as I think people see DFS as a fully fledged adult, so to speak, to use a terrible metaphor. And they see it as this fully fledged adult right now that's kind of fighting for its legal life. I see a child, not even a child, a baby in its infancy that sort of got ahead of itself in terms of growth and is now, I think, experiencing the inevitable sort of fallback that any economic bubble in any industry is going to create. But I think the cool thing is daily fantasy is an idea that exists beyond any one company, and it's a great idea. It's a pretty freaking good idea. People, I think, are always going to want to play a better, more gratifying version of season-long fantasy sports. And so I think as we sort of recognize that, hey, this isn't the death or the potential death of the industry, this is just growing pains as we kind of move in to a new level of maturity for the industry, I think a lot of people will begin to welcome changes with open arms, as opposed to feeling like even admitting that these changes need to happen sort of signifies the end or the potential end of DFS.
Yeah, I think taking the long view is a smart approach. Hopefully we can get there sooner rather than later.
I think we will. I don't want to say any. I'm not going to reveal any sources or say I have any inside information, but I do feel like there's a very good chance, just based on the atmosphere that I've been exposed to with all of this happening, that as long as sites are willing to take reasonable steps, I think that there's a great possibility that daily fantasy is going to not only stick around, but be stronger than ever within a year or two.
Fantastic. So, before we wrap up, what's next for you? Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in your world?
I'm so glad you asked that question. And by the way, I want all the listeners to know, all the viewers to know, I did not ask you to ask that question, did I?
No, you didn't. That's all me. I take full responsibility.
Okay, and the reason I wanted that to be abundantly clear is because there were a lot of people when this came out, a lot of detractors. And listen, I knew there would be. You have to be willing to walk through shit if you're going to talk about something like this. I apologize if you're not allowed to curse. You can bleep that out. But, you have to be willing to take the heat. But one of the more absurd things that I heard is that, I'm only using this as an opportunity to promote something new. And I just wanted to take a second to point out the paradoxical nature of that statement. I have to work again, assuming I'm going to stay in the daily fantasy industry. Now, maybe people think I should leave and not come back. I get that. That's cool. That's one perspective. But if I'm going to stay in the daily fantasy industry, I have to have a job again at some point. I got 2 kids. I got a wife, and I got a father, actually, who lives in my basement, kind of turning the tables on what's supposed to happen. So if I have to have another job, that means eventually I'm going to be doing something, and that means that no matter what I do in the future, somebody is going to chime in and say, I only did it so I could promote my next venture. So while I can't specifically talk about what I'm going to do next, I did just want to point that out and kind of note how humorous it is, and that if I was going to promote anything in particular, I would have done it by now, and I also would have talked about it in the piece, but I felt that it was extremely important for the piece and the quotes that I had to stay sort of uncorrupted and not tainted by the idea that I was trying to promote something new or anything, and that's why I'm not going to talk about it with you either. Just wanted to throw that out there. So,
absolutely. Well, when you do get back to work, we'll be happy to have you back on the airwaves or whatever your next venture is. So you can follow him at CrazyGabey on Twitter, and you can follow RotoQL at RotoQL app. Gabey, it was a pleasure to have you on, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Absolutely, my man. And again, to all the viewers, make sure you check out the app. It is phenomenal. Most customizable thing I have used in my entire time in the industry.
Awesome. Thanks again.